Alright, so now that we've got the overview out of the way, we're going to actually get into something a little bit more fun now. And I'm going to show you how to make a beat from scratch. So there are more than a couple ways to go about this, but I'm going to show you the two main ways that you can make a drum beat in Ableton, and then you can kind of decide after this course which path you want to go down when it comes to making drums. Everyone has a preference, and they kind of develop that preference over time. I've actually even changed my preference, especially in the last couple of months. I used to use drum racks, and now I'm kind of using audio files. But yeah, there are three main ways to do it. So the first way to make a drum beat in Ableton is to use something called the drum rack, which you can see here. So you go to Instruments, Drum Rack. You can either drag that in, or if you double click it, it'll replace whichever channel or track you have selected. So if I have this one selected here and I double click drum rack, but it has to be the same type of track. So you can't, if I click an audio track and double click the drum rack, it's not going to replace it because it's a different type, because the drum rack is a MIDI, because we could play it on a keyboard like this. Whereas if I had this MIDI track selected and I double click drum rack, it's going to replace whatever was here with this. So just be wary of that, because I've seen new users lose their sounds and they don't know why, and it's because they've had their track selected and they've clicked something else, and it's just completely replaced it, and it will replace it even if you have MIDI clips in here. So all the work that you did before on the sound is going to disappear. So we got this drum rack here in this first track. I'm just going to delete these other ones so you don't need to see them. Now if you look down the bottom here, you'll see you got all these kind of empty cubes. These are going to be where we place the sounds that we want to use for our drums. So how do we do that? What we can do is go into samples and let's say grab a kick. So you don't have to follow along with this for now. I'm kind of just showing you the different techniques when it comes to making drums. In our next lesson, we are going to do the first exercise together. So let's say I wanted some typical drum sounds. I would grab this kick and then maybe a snare. If you don't know the names or what the names of the drums are, I do suggest maybe just Googling like a real drum kit. That way you're kind of aware of what sounds what. So I'll just grab a snare sound, and let's say we grab a hi-hat as well. So that's an open hat, so you can have an open hat or a closed hat. So now I've got these three sounds in my drum rack. If I make a new clip here, so to make a new clip in the drum rack, I just double click in an empty box. Now you can see I've got this little 3-key piano roll with my 3 samples in it. So if I put a little MIDI note here, you can see that's put a kick there. I'm just putting a bunch of kicks in, putting some hi-hats in, and then let's say I'll put some snares in as well. So if I play that by hitting this button here, you can see I got my beat. So that's a very simple way to do it, is to just use a drum rack. And you can just drag as many samples as you want here. You can see, I think it's up to 128. So you can have up to 128 sounds, which I don't think I've ever come close to. I mean, I usually have this first one barely full, so yeah, I don't think you're gonna run out of space drum rack wise. Now the other way to make a beat is to grab a MIDI track, and let's say we want our kick. You can see I got this MIDI track selected, and it says drop a instrument or sample here. So I can just grab this kick sample, and now that's going to turn that sample into a playable MIDI track. So I actually get the piano roll now, and you'll notice as I go up and down the pitch, or up and down the piano roll, sorry, the pitch is changing of that kick. You can see quite here it's very high and short, whereas if I come down here, it's really thuddy, low, and a lot slower. So just as a general note, C3 is your root note. So if you drop a sample in and you want to hear the original sound, it's going to be at C3. If you start to go away from that, you're going to be pitching up and down and changing the actual tone of that sound. So what you can do is, see, I've got my kick here. So this way you add more tracks, but I guess in the end it's a little bit more customizable when it comes to audio effects. Or sorry, just easier to customize. So I'm just going to grab a snare here, double click this MIDI track so I get that option, and then drag this into here. Now you can see I got my snare here. So if I make another clip, play it at C3, which is our root note, it's going to play the same sound that the snare actually is, the original sample was. And what I can do is exactly the same with the drum rack. So if I want my snare there, but now you have to do it separately because you have separated the sounds. And if I want my kick, so I'm just going to turn this track off. By the way, these yellow buttons here turn your tracks on and off. So if you don't want to hear something, just deactivate it by pressing that. I'm just going to turn this drum rack off, and we're just going to listen to these two. Now to play these two at the same time, you can either hit play on both, or you can come over here and just hit play on this master, and it'll play the whole row of those clips, or that whole scene. These are called scenes. So now you can see I've got essentially the same thing, got the kick and snare, I'm just missing the hat, which I would add in, but I'm not going to show you that now. But I've done it separately, so the kick is actually separate to the snare, and then this gives you a lot more, I guess, freedom when it comes to customizing each sound. They're not all in one drum rack or all in one track, but you can put effects separately on these sounds anyway. So I mean, you can go about it each way, but I do recommend when you're starting out, just put them in a drum rack, because you're not going to be messing around with the sounds and twisting them that much, especially to start out with. So we'll just stick to the drum rack. Now I did mention a third way, and that is once you get into the arrangement view. So if I go into the arrangement view and create audio tracks, so the shortcuts to create new tracks, and that can be in both views. So to create a new audio track on a Mac, it's Command T. To create it on the PC, it's Control T. To create a new MIDI track, it's Command Shift and T, or Control Shift and T on the PC. Now you're going to be using these shortcuts a lot, so I recommend you start using them and kind of just get used to them now. That way you build that habit, because it's going to speed up your workflow. The other way to do it is obviously just to right click and go insert track. But yeah, the quicker you learn these shortcuts, the quicker you can get your ideas out of your head and into this, which is the whole point. So definitely try and remember those and use them as soon as possible. Now what I'm showing back here is the other way to get drums in, which we're not going to use or worry about now, but I'll just show you anyway so you're aware of it. Same thing, if we grab our kick sample, what you can do is just drag it into an audio track. Now you can see we've got it on the first beat there if we drag it across. And if we hit play on that, you see we have our kick, and then you can add all your other sounds in here. Let's say you had a snare. You can just add your snare in, and you can't do it this way and just drag in the sounds separately, which is quite tedious and slow, but a lot of people like working that way because of the freedom it gives them to change the sounds. But yeah, I would say stick with the drum rack for now, and if eventually after you learn that you like one method over the other, feel free to start using it. But the drum rack is a really essential tool, and it's just definitely handy to know how it works. So yeah, those are the 3 ways to bring drums in and how to create drums. Now we're going to actually get stuck into it, and we're going to do our first couple exercises. So I'll see you guys in the next lesson.